But I do wonder what it will be like. I'm sure everyone's having these conversations, but like when we go back to traveling and hanging out, if it's just going to be like full on, like I want to party every other day.
The book that I was talking about talks about that too. And there's a lot of history, to call on. And obviously when we're in this pandemic situation, it's the ultimate like de-risk situation. Everyone gets incredibly less risky with their money, with their social interactions, with their sexual activity, with everything. And then as pandemics end, we don't just go back to a normal amount of risk. Historically, we actually go to like an extreme level of risk. And so I think we're going to see a lot more, risky behavior socially, economically. People are going to want to go out, party, have fun, kind of get all of that out of their system that they've been holding in for the last 2-3 years when this is all over.
I just hope there's more leniency about showing up to work like an hour late.
I think, and I don't work out of an office or do anything like that, but I got to imagine that this is going to change that culture a lot, because
it already has, definitely.
It's totally doable to work in a quasi your own terms, but also in the office structure where you can, be on email, but go to the office at 11 o'clock and then have your FaceTime, but maybe not go on a Thursday and take the day to work from home that day, like a little bit more fluid.
I think there's a lot of people who don't have to work in physical, like service jobs or jobs where you have to be there in person, who probably hated going to the office. I am thankfully not one of them, but I've had jobs where I hated going to the office, and in that situation, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm working from home. I am never going back. Like, I've proved that I can do my job from home, so I am not going back to fucking Bloomberg, like swiping in and milling around that ridiculous 6th floor, whatever. Like, I don't want to see these people. I just want to stay home.
Well, and the bullshit of being in an office and certain dynamics, and I think every company is probably different, but with certain types of businesses and certain types of companies, I feel like the distractions of being there actually probably drive productivity down. Definitely. Versus being able to work on your own schedule with your own structure. If you're a motivated, successful person, you know how to set yourself up to get the work done that you need to do.
Also, potentially, it exposes all the people who like maybe weren't doing that much work and were kind of just like slipping in between the cracks of accountability. And by being in an office, you are like, hi, I'm here. I've checked into work today. I'm like typing on my computer. I am producing work. I am exercising my work controls, whatever. And then all of a sudden, if you're working from home, it's like, hey, what's Bill doing? I haven't like gotten an email from him in 3 days. It's like, we don't know what he does. We don't know what he's been doing for 3 years.
Right. That's funny. So for people that don't know, you're a former journalist turned comedy writer, producer, very active Twitter vigilante. How do you feel about where we're at now versus where we have been the last 4 years as we've changed administrations? And because you've been a guy who's really been on the forefront of trying to call out the media and hold people accountable for the mess that we've been in the last 4 years. And I'm curious how you're feeling right now, because it seems like you've had a stressful few years.
The answer I thought is like uncertain and just, it's equally weird. It's equally strange. The pandemic made the way that we all consume media heightened in a lot of ways. And certainly there were things going on in media before the pandemic that, like, was worthy of criticism. And then during the pandemic, I just feel like, at least for the first few months, everyone was watching the news all the time. Like, everyone was at home, everyone was watching the news, reading the news. Like, people were watching cable news who would never watch cable news in their life. So in that sense, I think it increased the amount of news consumption we all got, which can be a really good thing. But in terms of like where we are versus where we were, I don't actually know. And I haven't been in the news industry in several years, and it just from as a consumer of news, it feels like people are kind of feeling it out. I I wish I had like a concrete, tangible answer on that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What's the best way to consume news these days? Because you said, okay, more people are consuming news in the pandemic, but when the structure of news is absolutely chaotic and actually the incentive system for news organizations is profit as opposed to, facts or anything that you would think would be important, what's the best way to actually get news these days?
It's a great question. I mean, the best answer is probably vary your sources, which isn't particularly helpful. One thing that I do, I think, I hope this is right, but I follow individual reporters who I really trust and like their reporting on specific things. I think a lot of the ways that news outlets work is that, I mean, this is definitely how it works, is like you can't put everything in your story. You can't put everything on the air. Like you only have 2 minutes on the air. You only have 1,500 words in a story, 800 words, whatever it is. So you have all this leftover stuff, and like social media is a great place to put it. So follow the people. I don't want to tell anyone like follow this person, but
yeah, right.
in the process of like how you are, whether it's like reading the New York Times or the Boston Globe, whether it's watching CNN or like ABC Evening World News, whatever it is that you see and you're like, that person did a really good job explaining why vaccines are being delayed, or why Saudi Arabia is like not cooperating with the United States on the Khashoggi report, whatever it is. Follow that person, because that person is more likely to be reliable consistently, and you can kind of like assess that. And also it's just easier. Like you don't have to wait for, you don't have to wait for them to like come back on the new, like social media is great for reporters to kind of just like dump their notebooks out. So in that sense, I feel like that's a good way to stay on top of things. But people don't have a lot of time to do that. And I totally get that. There's, listening to the radio is like a great way to get news if you're driving, but like people aren't really driving anymore. Watching TV is a great way to get news if you're watching the right thing at the right time, but like that's not always the case. A lot of times the best way to get news is to actively seek it out. Like if you really admire, also I'll say like, one reporter I really admire is who I've been following just because I've been following him today, is Dave Weigel at the Washington Post, who's been covering the CPAC nonsense. And he has like excellent perspective and reporting on a lot of this stuff. So like I will follow him. I will look for his like specific stories, but that takes like a lot of effort. And I don't know if people have that effort. And that's really hard. There's a ton of podcasts that do news like recaps and stuff. And I have to believe that that's like a more thorough way of digesting stuff. It's not as immediate, which is fine. But that does seem to be like a pretty thoughtful way. That's like a nice thing to come out of like, everyone has a podcast. I say that with no sense of irony, obviously. But that medium really has benefited news, I think, because it gives you time to digest. You can have extended interviews with people. That's kind of nice. I guess especially because of the pandemic, like we were talking about, podcasts have become more popular. News podcasts have also become more popular, and that is that's probably a benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's a need for what we were talking about earlier, long-form conversations and digesting information on a deeper level, because so much of it has been the headline and the tweet and the 140-character summary of what's going on. And when we talk about what's the best way to consume news, a lot of that isn't even up to you. Right. Because all of us are looking at the trending topics and what's going on. And so we're going to consume a big percentage of our news, whether we like it or not, if we're just interacting on social media. I
mean, don't you feel that I'll ask you, like, what do you do? Because I feel like a lot of people who are in my circle who aren't in news get news from their friends, which is almost like a romantic callback to the way that stories were passed down from person to person thousands of years ago or whatever. But it's like someone will be like, hey, did you see this? And then you go look it up, that to me seems like a very consistent thing that people have, which is like sending people links on text.
Yeah, we share stuff a lot.
Yeah. And that to me is a really important way of like you trust your friends more than anyone. You trust your friends more than you might trust the actual news itself. And if your friend says like, read this story, you will believe it because your friend told you that. That's like a very analog social media in a sense. A direct, here is, I'm giving you this piece of information to check out. And that to me happens like every morning between like 9 and 10 a.m. where I'm like sending links to people are sending me stuff. So yeah, I'm curious what you do also.
Do you think that enables like a groupthink type of situation?
I mean, in a weird way, like the worst smears about Obama being a secret Muslim from Kenya were started by email forwards in 2007 that were like from crazy racist people that were just like forwarded around to, the trope is like your crazy uncle or whatever. And like, that is kind of the same thing. But at the same time, I don't trust my crazy racist uncle, but I do trust my friend who lives in Philadelphia, and like, he'll text me something, once every couple days, be like, this is insane. Like, check out what happened in Philly. And then I'll be like, that is insane. Thank you for sending me that. So in a way that is like, I mean, it's weird because there's too much news and there's also not enough at the same time. It's kind of always been this way. So if you're like, reading a newspaper used to be 45 minutes. I can get through the A section and I'll find out everything I need to know. That is definitely no longer the case. And now the way that people consume stuff is like, there's so much out there. I don't have time to read everything. But if someone you trust, if someone in your family or one of your friends sends you something, that goes right to the top. That's like a recommended thing, It's different than just tweeting it or putting it on Facebook. It's like a personal thing. I'm not like endorsing any sort of method of sharing news. I'm just pointing out I will read Nick's texts to me when he sends them to me.
Well, that's a really interesting thing that we probably don't realize we do so much. You're right. A lot of that information that we're consuming probably does come from the social aspect of it. Definitely. Because we love sharing these things.
Yeah.
And we don't just do it with news. We do it with funny stuff. We do it with, random stuff that we'll see on Instagram even. The shareability of stuff on Instagram is so huge.
Yeah. Group chats too. Like group chats are insane.
Yep.
We're in this weird I don't know if you saw, but after the Ted Cruz Cancun scandal, his wife was outed in their group chat as being as texting like, hey, we're going to go to Cancun, does anyone want to come? And that undercut their message that it was like, oh, like this was always going to be like a work from home thing. Like, no, that was bullshit. And so then people started talking like, oh my god, like there's a mole in the group chat. And it was like, well, who in your group chat is your mole? And so I saw a tweet, I wish I could credit the person who did this, I forget who it was, but it was like, your group chat is only as strong as the number that you have in there that you haven't put in your contacts yet. Like the person you don't know, that is the person who's going to leak the shit.
That's good. The way that I consume news is probably a lot of that. We have this family group chat. I got a big family, as you know, and so we'll be sharing random articles here and there. Mm-hmm. So I'll consume a lot of news like that, a lot from other friends that'll send me things. My manager, Tim, he and I send articles back and forth all the time. In the morning, I'll wake up, I'll go get a coffee, drive around, make phone calls. I listen to the 5-minute NPR news, hourly news update on Spotify. Nice. And that gives me kind of like the foundation to just make me feel like, all right, I know what's going on, and if there's anything huge that might have happened, I'll be aware of it.
I think that's what most people need, right? They just want you want the top line, and if something like strikes you as particularly interesting, you'll go deeper on it, or if it's like a story you've been following for a few days, you'll go deeper on it. Yeah, and then I think I actually, when I want to go deeper, I'll listen to more podcasts. I like The Daily, I like different podcasts, but more and more, I've tried to detach myself from the news cycle and just try and get to a deeper level of kind of what's going on more of a weekly, monthly basis, and do that deeper dive, and try and stay out of the day-to-day components of it, especially now that Trump is not president. Yeah. I feel a little bit more comfortable. A lot of people feel that way.
Back.
I definitely have heard that from a lot of people. That's like, once he left, there didn't seem to be this urgency that was like, okay, I gotta watch the news every day. I can take a backseat now. Like things might be okay. As if watching the news was their way of being like, I'm ready. If anything goes wrong, I am available. I can tweet. I am like, let's do it. Let's march to the streets.
Yeah. So do you think that just how do you feel about where we're at with news media these days? It seems to me that you have a lot of problems with the old system of media, or maybe not the old system, but the system of the last 10 years that has really
it's struggling, like, and I think people in media know that it's in this weird place where, like, you have an entire political party that's, like, voted repeatedly now, like, we're fine with conspiracy theories, we wanted to overturn the election, like, we are operating in bad faith, and then the media is in this position of being like, well, what do we do with that? Do we keep interviewing these people? Like, we can't say no, we can't just ban an entire political party from the news. That would be insane. And so the alternative is to just keep pretending things are normal. And I would like to think that there's, like, a middle ground there, but no one has the answer to it. I mean, I've been kind of on this, like, push to stop these, the people who push the big lie, to stop them from appearing on the news and not being confronted about that. That's hard for a lot of people in media because they'll be accused of being biased, which is unfair. If a news host is interviewing, someone like Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, and McCarthy says, like, well, this election was stolen, which is a thing that he is saying, then the news host should, in my view, say, that's a lie. We have to stop this interview. Sorry, we can't expose that. Anything else you say is obviously not credible. We can't expose our viewers to that. And the interview there. If they did that, the right wing would come after them so hard. And that's dangerous for a journalist to, like, expose themselves to that sort of criticism. The right wing is really good at ginning up fake outrage. They pummel people on social media. They tag your boss. They tag your news outlet. Then the news outlet is like, well, do we have to put out a statement? Like, do we stand by this? Like, what are we supposed to do? Then the story becomes about the news outlet. None of those people in news want to deal with that. That's, like, a really tough situation to be in. So they're trying to avoid that. And the alternative just seems to be like, let's just keep pretending everything's normal. So this is obviously a moment for people in those positions to figure out what is the balance. And no one has the right answer. I have to assume these conversations are happening. I hope these conversations are happening, like, internally at places. But I think people are noticing because, I mean, it's hard not to notice. It's hard not to. You can't just turn on the TV and be like, why is Steve Scalise on TV? Like, didn't that guy just vote to overturn the election after the Capitol riot? Like, he still voted to overturn it. What am I watching right now? So, in a sense, it's deeply effed, but it's also the same type of, I guess, attitude that has been there since Trump ran, which was like, well, he's going to hold a press conference about Obama's birth certificate, and he's going to finally announce that he doesn't believe Obama was born in Kenya. Like, this horrible racist smear that has plagued Obama for so long and been used as, like, a disgusting rallying cry for the Republican, like, crazy voters. And Trump was going to do a press conference to be like, okay, I don't believe it anymore. And what he did was he put on this, like, publicity stunt because he knew all the cameras were rolling. The news was taking it live. So he comes out there and he's like, I'm going to have a big announcement, but first I want to introduce this person. And then he brings up this, like, I think it was like a World War II veteran or a Korean War veteran or something. And he brought up, like, all of these military people to endorse him. And, like, the news that was taking it live was just like, what are we supposed to do? Like, if we cut away, we might miss the moment where Trump says, I don't believe Obama was born in Kenya anymore. But if they don't cut away, they're putting this, like, weird, like, bad faith endorsement on the air. And that is like, oh God, like, man, you got to pull my teeth to give credit to Trump. But like, he manipulated the media by doing that. He kept doing it. And here we are now, and it feels like the media is still kind of being manipulated by other people in the Republican Party. So if that stunt didn't prompt some sort of conversation, I don't know what would. Certainly, there were conversations that were happening, especially in the coronavirus in, like, May, when Kayleigh McEnany became the press secretary, and she outright was just, like, spreading misinformation and lying, and it was horrible. And, like, the news outlets stopped taking them live eventually, which was definitely the right thing to do. So those conversations did happen. They happened late. They stopped taking Trump live too because he was spreading nonsense about hydroxychloroquine and bleach and all that crap. So eventually they did do that. I guess the hope is that they do it earlier now, but it's hard. I think it's hard to make the case for that in an industry that's kind of slow to change. I don't know if that is an accurate description of where we are.
I hear you.
But
it's complex.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Obviously, there's no simple answer to it. And I imagine if you were in that room with some of the people who are making those decisions, my guess is you would be pushing for just a no nonsense policy across the board.
And then
just cut it.
And then there's
off.
a chance that the news network, that if they listen to me, that we might lose our show. We might lose a ton of money. Like,
right. They go out of business,
right.
And right.
It's weird. There's consequences for every action, and this is just an example of one part of of media that like is kind of put in an awkward spot. But the other, the like really, really frustrating thing is that like Trump spent 6 years demonizing the news industry and characterizing it as fake, and going after specific reporters in a bad faith way for their good reporting, going after specific news outlets in a horrible way for their good reporting, and calling it all lies, smears, fake, whatever, like you're making up sources. Everything that Trump said was wrong, but he created an environment in which the news media was despised by almost every Trump supporter. So to come from the other side of that and to also criticize the media is a tricky thing to do, because I would like to think that things that we can say about the media are, they're aggressive, but like they're productive and they're coming from a good faith place, not a bad faith place. But drawing that distinction is easy to do in a podcast. It is hard to do on social media, especially at a time when people are so like hot about everything, and they might get the wrong impression. And so, at times I may not be sensitive to that subtlety, which is too bad, because you don't want to see like the mob go after someone for the wrong reason. But you do want to see good change. And like happens a lot on social media where like this happened the other day. Someone tweeted, a reporter tweeted something that was like quoting Trump saying like he won the election. And I think it was like an AP report or something. And I like replied to them and I was like, can we not do this? Like, can we please stop quoting this guy? And then he deleted it and then reposted a thing that was like, Trump repeats his false claim, blah, blah, blah. I was like, thank you. Cool. Okay. That's great. I feel like that was a good exchange.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it does seem like there's starting to be some accountability there.
I hope so. Maybe. I mean, it's who knows? Like, and also like Twitter is not a real reflection of life. A lot of the media conversations happen there because it's first, but it's not like everyone's getting their news on Twitter. It's just kind of like,
well, that's a good point. When you're on Twitter, you feel like Twitter's the most important thing in the world. And you and I are both very active on Twitter in different realms, but we probably both hold a lot of weight as to what's going on Twitter because we spend a lot of time on it and it's important to us. But not everybody's on Twitter. I mean, there's a lot of people on Twitter, don't get me wrong. And it moves the needle.
No, but there are things that happen on Twitter that like people in the real world don't even know about. And like, I remember there was like, at some point, like this is before the pandemic, when I was like, oh man, did you see this like crazy meme? Like, what do you think about it? And they were like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, like the meme, like these people tweeted it. And they're like, I've been on Twitter all day. I was like, how do I explain this to you?
Right. Well, back to what we were talking about earlier about like pandemics and how history repeats itself and all this stuff too. This whole thing that's been happening with people just absolutely becoming so much more polarized and just going to the left and to the right super hard. Obviously, that has happened a million times over the course of history. And then it usually culminates in some big, life-changing event like a war or, in rare cases, some sort of peaceful negotiation.
That's what's happening. We're going to get the big peace. It's coming. I can feel it.
And so that's kind of what I wanted to ask you is like, how do we take this polarization and these mobs of people on both sides that are just incredibly mobilized on social media, and how do we start to have 80% of us start to have maybe a little bit more middle ground conversations, because there's going to be crazy people. And I think that on the right side, there seems to be a lot more crazy people right now. But how many of those crazy people on the right are doing it because they actually just want to stay in power, and it's the narrative that they've been pushing because they did a risk, a calculation to see that with our constituents, this is a way for us to win votes. And as that changes, does the things that they do change? And, for most of them, the answer is probably yes, because a lot of politicians are scummy.
They'll change if their voters change, but their voters aren't changing. I think that's what we've just kind of learned.
So
it's really hard to imagine a world in which all of the bad faith actors in the Republican Party decide, like, we're going to do the right thing right now. I really cannot imagine that happening. They had January 6th was like the last line. That was it. That was the big one. Like, terrorist attack, insurrection, white supremacists storming the Capitol. Like, at that point, you should be able to say, like, that was bad. And a majority of them said it was good. So there is nothing that could happen that would make them say the right thing. This happens even after, like, horrible, like, tragic in every way school shootings where we're, like, just people who have no connection to it are watching the news and just, like, sobbing. And we're all like, that could be someone I know. That could be my kid, or that could be my niece or nephew. This is awful. We have to do something about gun violence. And Republicans are like, we don't want to. Like, they'll never do the right thing. So I cannot see a world in which there is some sort of, like, bringing people together, because there is no compromise. Like, what would even the terms of that be? Like, how do you do that? I cannot even come up with a proposition to start with,
So then where does life go? Where does life go in 10, 20 years, 30 years for this country?
Man.
Do more people start to come over to the side of, people that are maybe in the majority in terms of what they're viewing and how they want the country to
It's
be?
so weird because, like,
more and more people start to think like that, and that those kind of crazy ideas become more and more fringe.
The ideas that I think 10 years ago we would have considered fringe are now so this different ideas now that we would still consider as crazy are cemented in QAnon and just the broader world of Facebook conspiracy theories. Though, and Newsmax, OAN, Fox News, like, all of that is part of this conspiracy theory ecosystem. Those things are so detached from the world that you and I live in. It truly cannot coexist. There are, I mean, I don't know if you know people, but, like, I have friends who have lost family members to QAnon. I had two cousins, this was like a few years ago before QAnon became as potent as it was now, but two cousins who were, like, into InfoWars and stuff, and, like, I haven't talked to them since Charlottesville because they were like, we love it. And I was like, you are so psychotic. Like, you cannot defend these neo-Nazis. And we're Jewish. They were Jewish. And they were like, oh yeah, this isn't what the media says it is. I was like, all right, get the fuck out of here. Like, that's crazy. So these are real things that are tearing families apart. And that in itself, like, a Facebook conspiracy theory to destroy a family is as depressing as you'll see anything happen short of physical violence. You can watch these really good, I think one of the best, two of the best reporters out there right now are a guy named Donny O'Sullivan for CNN and Ben Collins at NBC News. And they do reporting on QAnon as a movement and from a very, very, like, dark perspective of the people who have been affected by it. And the other day, Donny did a story on these, I think it was these two women whose they weren't related. I think each of their mothers, I could be getting the detail wrong, but each of their mothers fell to QAnon, and it was like an interview with them about how they had lost their mom, and they described it as, like, I feel like my mom is gone. Like, she doesn't really exist. And I was watching this, like, days after I was talking to a friend of mine who was kind of going through the same thing. They're not at that stage yet, but he sees it coming, and it's brutal. Like, it is something that I could never imagine going through, because it doesn't make sense to me. Like, in my brain, QAnon is obviously nonsense. It's a racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. It involves like fantastical things from like a perverted Bible. It's so gross and so dumb. And yet it is like the most potent thing to stick in America since like Christianity. So how can you have that world on one side, which is no longer fringe? Like the Republican Party is like, we're fine with this. How can you have that on one side? And then on the other have us and want to come together and say like, well, we see your point. Maybe there's some common ground here. There is none. So if the question is where do we go, like, I think we just go our separate ways.
Yeah. It may be. That may be the conclusion that ends up happening with this kind of chaotic dynamic.
It's just sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
But, you know, I think that these things are interconnected on a lot of levels. And I think that there's a big connection to the economic inequality that we have right now and that we've gotten to over the last 20, 30 years, to the point where there is so much space between the top people who earn money in this country and in this world, really, and the people at the bottom, that it is just completely out of whack. And that amount of inequality and lack of opportunity economically for a big percentage of people, I think drives people to fringe ideas. And then you put on top of that, and that happens historically. It happened in the 1930-45 period, which led to the World War. And this situation is unique because we kind of have this accelerant with social media that we didn't have ever before in history. And so none of us can really understand how that plays out because of that new dynamic, right? That
think about what happened on to your point about social media being an accelerant. Think about what happened on 9/11, that day, that week, that month, that year. And then think about, I mean, you were probably what, 10, 12?
Yeah, I was in second grade when 9/11
Okay,
happened.
so you're 7. Okay. I was 14.
Okay.
So I remember like years went by after that before I first heard about 9/11 conspiracy theories. And obviously they were just psychotic. We joke about these things as like jet fuel can't melt steel beams.
Right.
Like
There's like memes about it.
Like, yeah. This was a YouTube video that went viral. I couldn't tell you when it was, but I think it was like years later. I'm sure at some point, like there were always sprinklings of conspiracy theories about 9/11, maybe in the few months after or whatever, like people piecing together news clips, like the same way that when JFK was shot, there are conspiracy theorists, but these things used to take time. That conspiracy theory timeline was compressed from then to now to instantaneous. Like there is no longer an incubation period for a conspiracy theory. When January 6th happened, when the insurrection happened at the Capitol, that day during the Capitol attack, there were people on Fox News, on Newsmax, on OAN, on social media instantly saying, this is Antifa. This isn't what you think it is. This is a false flag operation. And you could maybe if you're being generous, you could say like, well, that's just a few people trying to get attention. On the floor of the House, as they were coming back to vote for certifying the election that night, Matt Gaetz gets up there and he says, the Washington Times just reported this really interesting thing about how there's a facial recognition technology company that says some of these people were Antifa. Complete bullshit based on absolutely nothing. And that's a congressman on the floor of the House while the attack is like literally 1 hour old. Like there's still debris in the Capitol. And he's saying that this was Antifa. So it took 0 seconds for a conspiracy theory to form about what happened. That is the danger of misinformation, is that it no longer takes time. It just starts, like as soon as a thing happens, there's another side to it that's completely false. And that side gets elevated because the misinformation, the lie, the craziness of it is so much more attractive to people who aren't able to process what's real and what's not. That is the true accelerant, the problem of the accelerant.
Yeah, that's true. But, you know, to the things that you're doing on Twitter, right? Using comedy in a way to kind of come at some of these problems, and, you know, some of your tweets will go crazy viral, and you know, it actually leads to a broader conversation about the real issues, right? Combating that with, you know, spreading real information through those same channels is something that's super important. It's not as appealing to people. Real information is not as appealing to people. We want the sensationalized story, the conspiracy. We want to believe that there is some dark, secret society behind something because it makes us feel better about ourselves, because we think to ourselves, well, I could be, you know, something if it weren't for all of these gatekeeping situations, and, you know, and so we want to believe that as human beings. And so we perpetuate these conspiracy theories, you know, a lot of us. But we can hopefully use those tools that conspiracy theorists use to also counteract that to a degree. But then also, this is where I think like the economic aspect of it comes in, is that as we get more economically prosperous, people get more access to information, they get more intelligent, they are, you know, less stressed out about where they're going to get their meals or have a shelter. And so we get a little bit better as a society overall. And then those fringe ideas start to become less and less appealing to us, right? And so I think that might be, and I'm just trying to be optimistic about this because the alternative of it is so dark. And who knows where we're going to go? We might go to a very dark place, but that might be a direction that we go here that helps us a little bit, you know, and helps a percentage of us get out of those negative loop conspiracy theory, you know, get out of that world.
It's almost like, I mean, the pandemic and quarantine kind of aggravates everything. So it definitely worsens conspiracy theories. It creates its own conspiracy theory, this idea that COVID isn't real, that masks are liberal conspiracy, that Bill Gates is putting a microchip in the vaccine, whatever. But it also means people have more time to spend on Facebook, spend online doing, like, looking at stuff that isn't true. I guess in your optimistic reading of the situation, there's an offshoot chance that, like, when the pandemic is over, we spend less time on Facebook and we go outside and we hang out and we see friends. And that means that's less time for people who are susceptible to these poisonous ideas to be exposed to them. That could be great. And it would be, I mean, the shock of a lifetime, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But sure, I'm willing to believe in it. Like, I'm willing to hope for it.
Well, it's great to hope. It's great to hope. But I mean, we're in a toxic relationship in this country, you know?
Yeah, but like, what do we do about it? Like,
well, that's the thing. Do we stay frozen in this situation, or does it eventually reach a precipice?
It really feels like the ultimate person who could be like the empathetic come together person is Joe Biden. And I think he is he's obviously not as progressive as I would like, but like, it's kind of hard to imagine a more empathetic leader during a pandemic than him. And the response to his election victory was, A, you didn't actually win. B, you're somehow a socialist that Kamala Harris is controlling like a puppet. Like, it's so bad. So I don't know what we could have done. Like, policy stuff aside, like, Biden has a tragic history, understands loss and grief more than any elected official I've seen, with the exception of like John Lewis maybe. And here he is trying to be like, guys, like, I don't want to do the Green New Deal. I don't want to do minimum wage hikes. I don't want to do any of that leftist stuff. I don't want to do any of the crazy immigration stuff on the right. I don't really want to do anything other than bring people together.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word unity, and I'm going to tell you that I feel your pain, and I want us to get out of the darkness, and I want us to emerge better, brighter, hopeful for the future. Like all of the cheesy things that should make you feel like, yes, let's do this. And it could not be less effective. Like the Republican response to it is like, go fuck yourself. They don't want that at all.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. On the social media thing, one dynamic I think that's pretty interesting is this idea of the pay for play aspect on social media, where I don't know if you saw this news yesterday that people are going to start being able to charge
super
for the super
tweets,
follow,
baby.
right? And this just incredible trend, of kind of economic activity with things like Patreon and OnlyFans and like these subscription models for consuming content. And I think that will play a part into this dynamic of how social media is able to be such a driving force for some of this ideology and polarization. Because as social media changes and becomes more of a economic thing where it's pay for play and you're following certain news organizations, you have to pay for it, and it's not this open source situation where it's all kind of free game. There might be a chance where the information is maybe kind of reeled back in a little bit and not spreading in the same way that it is now.
Maybe the super tweets thing to me seems like it's going to be taken advantage of by the right wing, like they take advantage of everything.
Yeah. And a lot of people are going to make a lot of fucking money.
Yeah, sure.
But to your point, like right-wing people will make a lot of money getting followers, right? To post fringe ideas, and then that money is going to go towards something.
Yeah, it's probably not ideal, but I could be way wrong about that. Like it might be a great way to like pay creators for their good stuff. I will definitely not be doing it. I think it's just kind of weird. Like the idea of thinking like, this tweet is actually worth money.
Right.
It's like psychotic to me. Like it's some sort of like cryptocurrency.
Right.
But I also believe that information, not that Twitter is equivalent to information, but like it's just better when things are free because then more people can access it. And like that should be the ultimate goal. If you have some sort of like incredible hot take on like an Avengers movie and you want to charge people for it and people want to pay for it, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. But I do have a feeling that like the Ben Shapiro's of the world are probably going to take advantage of the super tweets thing in their right-wing way that they are so good at and the left has been unable to figure out. That's
true. And yeah, there's a lot of monetization happening in that whole world already, as is too, with people monetizing YouTube channels and all of this stuff on these super fringe ideas. Yeah. And these companies are doing, a subpar job of kind of monitoring that. And I think they've gotten more and more active.
It's interesting because the idea of Twitter is a video game, and every tweet is like, can I go viral? And it's either yes or no, or maybe sometimes in between. And the people who are really good at it, whether they're doing it as a joke, as a news item, as an announcement, as a viral video, or they're ripping someone off, whatever it is, that's part of that game. The tweets that go viral have value inherently baked into their numbers of how many people retweet it and like it or reply to it or whatever. If you're paying for tweets, those tweets are not going to go viral. They can't by definition. So it's going to be a weird way. I remember when Instagram was like experimenting with this idea of taking away the number of people who have liked something. Mm-hmm. And they did that, right? Like they
tested it out in certain geographic regions.
And that's an incredible experiment to be like, what is the value of this picture I'm looking at? If I don't know how many people have liked this, is it a good picture or a bad picture? What do I think about that? And that to me is excellent because then you're judging something based solely on what it is, not what other people think. I admit there have been tweets I've seen that have like 40,000 retweets, and I'll be like, why? I don't get this. Like, I don't think this is that funny. And then there are tweets that I think are like outrageous and they have like 3 retweets. So yeah, I don't think the number is not always reflective of what it is, but how are you going to value a tweet in a premium pay format, whatever it is, if the people who are viewing it and are assigning that number quality are limited by who's paying? It just seems like a kind of a weird way to look at the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it changes the dynamic of what social media is. But that's kind of why I brought it up, because maybe that's important. Maybe it's important for us to kind of change the dynamic of social media, because clearly social media has played such a huge part in this polarization that's happened, and everyone loves to talk about it. Like, I watched The Social Dilemma, and totally.
I watched The Social Dilemma, and then I tweeted
everything
about it for 2 days.
Right, literally. But if
you how many followers do you have? You have like 60-something thousand?
I wish 45 or something like that.
45,000. Still very good. Yes. So if you did super tweets, what do you think you could charge? What would the cam rate be?
Well, I think I don't really understand exactly how the model works, but I thought that it was a baseline $4.99. Like, I don't think they're allowing you to charge like a scale.
Okay. If you charge $4.99, how many people do you think would sign up?
Probably in the hundreds.
That's good.
Not a lot. I mean, maybe less.
That's pretty good,
less, though. I would think
100 even. That's not bad.
Yeah, I think that it reaches
$500.
No, for sure. Well, I think that there's multiple conversations to be had on the super follow thing, because I do think that when you think about arts and creative, right? Yeah. And even comedy and
that's true.
Things
you
like
can
that,
offer special things.
It's a really good thing, and I think that actually something that could really benefit society is artistic people having more money.
That's true, and then they can say to the people who are paying for their tweets, like, you get this first, and you helped create this.
Right, but think about the best civilizations in the world. Right, artists were the core part of the best civilizations in the world.
Interesting.
And
sure. Yeah,
they had a lot of money. They were really important in the hierarchy of society. Yeah. And so, those civilizations were more beautiful and probably a little bit better, And so I don't think it's a bad thing for artists and creative people to be able to monetize what they're doing.
Definitely.
On the arts side, I think the idea of a super follow or doing a Patreon page or something like that is cool. And I'm all about the independent grind. I was with a major label. I did 2 albums with a major label. That whole process sucked, because what's happening in the news world that you live in or used to live in is, what's happening now in the news world happened 10 years ago in the music industry.
That's wild. Yeah.
Right. There was a systemic shift where there was about 3 years there between 2010 and 2013 where people weren't buying CDs anymore at physical stores, but there was no Spotify and there was no Apple Music and there was no streaming. And so record labels, these huge companies with, billions of dollars balance sheets, had no income coming in whatsoever. And their whole infrastructure was set up to distribute physical items to a physical store and sell it.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And they had to completely change their business model to digital. And it was, at first it was the iTunes store and directly downloading stuff and putting the MP3 on your phone or your iPod, right? But even that wasn't super monetizable. And it was only in 2014, 15, and beyond, when streaming services, in particular Spotify, came about, that record labels actually started to succeed again.
Wow.
So that shift that's happening in news right now already happened in music, and it was a shit show. And I happened to get a record deal right in the middle of that shit show. And so I kind of saw that from a major label level, working at Atlantic Records, working with Atlantic Records to do my first album. I saw how they didn't know how to address the change that was happening in just the economic model of the music business. And
that is fascinating to me.
Yeah. And no,
did you get
really
screwed by that? Did it hurt you because you got the deal during it, or was it good because you got the deal before it was like catastrophic?
To me, it was kind of like going to college, because I was 18. I got a record deal when I was 18. So I left high school and I signed a record deal, moved out to LA, made part of the album in LA, then moved back to Boston, finished the album, put it out. And I was working with some of the top people at the label, and they found my music off of a website called DatPiff, which if you know DatPiff, was like the place to get like free mixtapes back in the day in like 2010.
Okay.
And so I put out a mixtape on Dat Piff when I was in high school, and it just randomly kind of went viral. And so they saw
what counts for viral in
it had like 6,000 downloads in like the first hour.
Wow.
Which was crazy. I mean,
did you put your account, like username on DatPiff or something? Do you have a page? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's, it was basically like a forum where you could upload mixtapes, and then there would be a front page of the best mixtapes of the day or the week.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And so if a mixtape got a certain amount of downloads, it reached like the top 8, and they would chart the mixtapes, and it was all free mixtapes. So it was a lot of like remixes. And this was how like a lot of hip hop music was coming out.
How did yours get bumped up? Was it like someone would download it and then like upvote it or something?
So, I mean, the way that it all happened is, and this is how my career literally started. I kind of like stumbled into it, is I just loved making music. I started actually recording my own music, and I was putting it out and burning CDs and selling it to my friends at my high school. Then it became selling it around the towns around my town, and then it became this kind of regional Massachusetts thing. Then I started putting the music on YouTube and Facebook, and then the biggest thing at the time, people were going on these blogs. And so it was all about the blogs back then, because Facebook was cool, but it wasn't like super...
It was for college kids, right?
There wasn't a lot to do. Yeah, there wasn't even a lot to do on Facebook. You could post your photos, and you could post status updates, but that was pretty much it.
You could
write
on your wall.
Yeah, you could poke people, But so I started putting my music on YouTube, and then basically emailing all these people that ran blogs, and there was a blog called Good Music All Day and Bro Bible, and this was when like Barstool Sports started out. Like it was the era of like blogs first getting like really popular.
Wow.
And so a couple of these blogs basically sponsored the mixtape, and they had like huge amounts of readers. And so when my mixtape dropped, it was sponsored by this old blog called Bro Bible, and that gave just a ton of eyes and ears onto it.
Awesome.
And so immediately when it dropped, it got like 6,000 downloads right away.
That's so funny, man.
Popped me up to the charts on Dat Piff. So I was on the front page of this like big music website at the time.
And it was a payoff from like, you pounded the pavement, like selling your stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining you as like
cool.
It's like a old timey salesman, like knocking on old ladies' doors and being like, would you like to buy a mixtape?
No, literally. So one of the things we did, I was like 16, 17 years old. We burned 400 blank CDs, and then we printed out
your
like
Gateway
little
2000.
Literally.
On your Dell.
And then I was in high school, we went to the middle school, and we tried to sell mixtapes to middle school kids.
This is actually the plot of The Wire.
Yeah. So then the principal at the middle school came out. I was like, what the fuck are you guys doing? And, obviously like the mixtape was super inappropriate and, all this stuff. We were trying to sell it to like 11-year-olds. And I was like, all right, well, that's probably not
You're
a good
like,
idea.
what, lady? I'm just trying to scam these kids.
Yeah, like, come on, shit. Just trying to get my music popping. But yeah, no, so...
Did they have like portable CD players that you were... like, how did they listen to it? Put in their car? I guess they were too young to have a car.
Yeah, I think people were using portable CD players still,
like
or you know what people were doing? They were putting the discs in their computers
and then uploading
putting it on their iTunes.
Yeah. Man, I used to do that, and then I would download shit off like Napster or LimeWire or Morpheus, whatever, and then I got a CD sticker printer, like a label printer, and so I remember downloading Green Day albums and then like formatting them for a CDR, and then it came like the CD sticker thing came with like this little spindle where you just like smash it down on the sticker. And so I was like downloading like an image of Green Day International Super Hits, printing it out, like trying to get it centered in Microsoft Paint or whatever, and then like smashing it down. And I remember I had like 5 or 6 of these. I was like, this is so janky, but like I put them in my car and I listen to them every day.
I remember exactly what you're talking about, that little device. That's so funny, man.
Whatever though, I was like, I'm not gonna support artists. I'm 13.
Right. And that was such a weird time for music, and people were uncomfortable with this idea that you could get music kind of for free.
Yeah.
Bands were trying to come out and say, don't download our music on LimeWire or Napster, and then they looked like shit because everyone was like, well, why?
Yeah.
And so they eventually had to figure out how to monetize music.
That is the news industry
in a way.
problem. That's like the same thing.
Right.
When we started giving away information for free, and then on the internet, because no one took the internet seriously in 1999, so it was like, sure, put everything online, and then people got used to it, and so when you start charging money for it, they're like, no, I've been getting this free for 15 years.
Right. And well, that's kind of brings it back full circle to the point that I'm trying to make is like, on the one hand, the super follow idea, I think, is a great thing for artists, creatives, whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is, something's got to give with social media. I think that it's so, embedded in our day-to-day life.
But take it up with the fucking people running it. They're the problem. Like Mark Zuckerberg is the problem. Jack Dorsey is the problem. Like, what... Man, I guess we're the problem too because we keep feeding into it. Like, I think Twitter should make 1 million changes, but I'm on it every day, like helping it thrive. Right. So that kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, it's you can't live without it, right? Like,
Right.
I mean,
they know that. We're like, this idea, the social dilemma introduced this idea that's like, if you're using this thing for free, you're the product. They're selling you to yourself.
Right. Right. But so this dynamic of paying for access, I do think that might lead to a different dynamic overall on social media. I think that there might be a world
if a lot of people do it, yeah.
Right. Because also, I mean, think about Instagram, right? Like, I don't know how active you are on Instagram. I know you're active on Twitter, but when I post on Instagram now, nobody sees it. No, compared to when I used to post on Instagram, I would get, a ton of people seeing it. It would come up relatively, on everybody's feed. Now, if you post something, it's barely coming up on anyone's feed unless it meets a certain criteria or it gets a bunch of likes initially that, get it in the algorithm.
So the algorithm judges you on instantaneous reception.
Well, the thing about the algorithms is that none of us even know what the algorithm is judging because the algorithm is changing itself every single day.
That's really disturbing, obviously, but also... Man, I wish I were more intelligent on this topic because I was going to say, like, TikTok has the best algorithm I've ever seen in my life, and I can't. I treat that thing like I assume a meth head treats crystal meth. Like, I really try to. Well, no, this is not an accurate analogy because I was going to say I try to avoid it, but like when I click on it, literally 45 minutes will go by, and I just have no idea what I watched.
Yeah.
That algorithm knows me so well. It knows exactly what I want. It's like a combination of like the best people who do the like comedy of a person talking to themselves as two different characters, whatever that's called.
Right.
Really good reactions to like the clickbaity, what's a video that lives in your head rent free? And then like I fucking hate those like baity things, but the reactions are great. Like the videos that live in people's head rent free are really funny. So like there's a bunch of those. I don't know. It just like it knows all this stuff that I love, and like I can't say I don't want to stop giving you my information. Like you get me. Like TikTok.
Well, there's
like,
something so like beautiful about like just.
I know.
And
it's random. It has like the fun like chat roulette option of like I have no idea what I'm gonna get.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's true. It's kind of a casino of content.
Definitely.
Definitely. And TikTok is like a little slot machine.
But I win every time because it knows that I don't like to lose.
Right.
It figured that out.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. There's some things on there that like, I was watching this thing the other day, yesterday, that was, I'll try to describe it in a way that people can search for it on Google and it'll probably come up in like a ripped Facebook video. It's a kid. He's like 18 or 19 and he has, medium length hair kind of parted in the middle. And he's sitting at his computer and then the door opens and it's him, but he has a buzz cut. And he's like, holy shit, what happened? And the kid at the door with the buzz cut is like, oh, you had a young life crisis and shaved your head. And so like they're doing this thing that's like, no, I didn't want to do it. And then the kid with the long hair is like, but what, can't you just like undo it? And the buzz cut kid is like, what are you talking about? And then instantly the buzz cut kid has long hair and the kid sitting down has the buzz cut. And the whole thing is like, then they break the fourth wall and he's like, wait, no, this is because you shot this video like out of order. And the kid's like, okay, I'm going to go outside and we'll start it over. So like the whole thing was scripted to like in this very specific way. It was insanely brilliant. It's like I started analyzing this thing. I was like, oh my God, this is everything I love. It's like time travel. It's like great editing. It's really funny. Whole thing cost $0 to make. Probably took this kid like, I don't know, an hour, and then like edited it and just did jump cuts with like no fancy music or anything like that. I mean, how the fuck? There are industries out here spending thousands and thousands of dollars to do sketches and like entertainment and big budget shit and graphics, and it's like, I don't know if I'll see anything funnier than that in like the next 3 weeks.
Well, I mean, spending time trying to figure out the best way to deliver a joke, and
exactly,
it's incredibly structured, but there's just nothing funnier than an organic thing.
Yes, it's organic, exactly.
Some kid that you've never seen before came up with, and it's just like, oh, I love that. Because
and
we love to see the
it.
Underdog win.
Yes, I love the underdog. I want to reward the shit out of that kid. I want him to get a bill. I want him to go viral on Twitter. I want it's so satisfying when that happens. And it's like, why do I care about this?
Right. But that's why I have a little bit of hope, because, as shitty as the circumstances are in a lot of ways, I love that there's so many people that are coming around to the idea of being a creative themselves, or putting themselves out there and figuring out a way to build a brand of themselves, and monetize it. And there's so much money to move around. And if we can take some of that money away from the top people, right? It would be great if you could tax it, but that's probably not going to happen.
Tax my tweets, Jack.
It's probably not going to happen. So, if we can just slowly start to like strip away some money from the top 1% by people going on OnlyFans and people getting super followed and, all of this type of stuff.
I see that.
I think that, more of us having economic prosperity, like I said before, leads to more opportunity, more education, more upward mobility, and less fringe ideas, less of a reason to go farther to the extreme because you're doing better in your life. So I'm just hopeful that these new platforms that allow people to be creative and build a business, really, is going to positively impact us. And I don't think that's going to solve the whole problem. There's always going to be crazy people, but I just hope that plays a part into it, and I'm optimistic about it.
I want to believe, Cam. I want to believe. I will set aside my dark heart pessimism for the next 30 seconds and join you in a moment of prayer and belief.
Yeah. But no, I mean, even for you, though, I feel like you were a guy who came from traditional journalism, right? And now you've pivoted into this comedy realm, and it's involved with news too and all these things. But what was that transition like for you? Was it a leap of faith? Was it an aha moment that told you, I need to do this for myself? And, what was that process like for you?
The moment that I knew I had to leave journalism for my own like to just comfort was the 2016 campaign, when you and I probably first started talking, and I remember we were sitting in your apartment and you were like, oh yeah, that's the champagne that we like never drank from when we thought Hillary was going to win.
Oh yeah.
And then there are champagne bottles around the country that I think were probably sitting for 4 years and were cracked open 3 months ago. But yeah, it was the 2016 campaign. I was covering it for a news organization and I hated it. I was simultaneously doing what I thought was like very fun videos for it, like news videos that were non-traditional. They were a little bit sketch based. They were informative and explanatory, but I knew this whole time, like we were kind of like messing around with the fun idea of Donald Trump, and we knew he was going to lose. So it was like, well, we don't have to take this seriously. We can like futz around with these people and use them to our advantage and put them in videos and make content and all that stuff. And then they fucking won, and none of those videos hold up. And like, what did we do it for? I hate that I was even a part of it. And like, I'd like to think that I was far from, very far from like the people who were the worst at making it possible that Trump was the nominee and then the president. But I played a part in it, and I hate that. And I feel like I can never live that down. I am not trying to say like I have a sacred responsibility. Like, I was a video producer for Bloomberg News. Like, I have no idea who saw these videos, probably very few people. But the fact that I was just like involved in it at all made me sick. And I realized that like I can never be a political journalist covering this shit, because it wasn't appropriate. Like, we did not treat him the way we should have treated him. And so that's why I left. And I feel like when I left, I could finally be honest about things. Like, we saw the first 12 to 18 months of the Trump administration when he was lying about everything. Like, this never changed, but it was really hard in the news media to call him a liar, and it was hard to call things lies. They had to say things like false statements and troubles with the truth and bending reality, all these like weird euphemisms that like don't have the same punch and don't reinforce this narrative that like the president is a liar. He is lying to you. For the first 3 months he was going off. I mean, even it ended up being much longer, but specifically for the first 3 months he was going off on this thing he called Spygate or like Obama Gate, and he was saying that Obama tapped his wire. He wiretapped me in Trump Tower. This fucking bullshit. And like, everyone, so I shouldn't say everyone, that is not true. The White House press corps and some people more than others were taking this seriously, even though they knew it was fake. They knew there was nothing to it, because like they could see through Donald Trump, but they had to play serious on camera. And I remember these, they're called pool sprays, when the press pool is kind of allowed into the cabinet room after a meeting, and they had to ask Trump like 2 or 3 questions or whatever. And there are these reporters being like, Mr. President, do you have any evidence that Obama wiretapped you? And Trump would be like, oh, it's all over the place, like whatever, he tapped me, blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, well, where's the evidence? And then he would give his same bullshit answer. It's like, you ask, you look, this is the greatest travesty that's ever happened to a president. And if you're being honest, if your job is to be honest, you should just not cover that story, because it's fucking bullshit. But they couldn't do that. It was so early in the administration that it was like, how are we supposed to treat this guy? And that was like a real crisis moment, because it set up kind of everything else that happened. So anyway, for 12 months, they like couldn't call him a liar. 12 months, they couldn't call him a racist. There were all these things that were like, well, why can't they say this? And I felt, after leaving journalism, I was like, I can say it because I won't be fired for it. And that's a luxury. And it sucks that there are great people kind of like trapped in this world of not being able to say what's really happening, because if you were to call Trump racist and you're a journalist, then the right wing comes after you and they're like, this person is biased, when really they're just stating a fact. And that it happened to people. That was what kind of like broke my sense of like, I don't want to be this person. Maybe I'm not a good reporter, maybe I'm not a good producer, but I can't be that person. So making the transition to comedy was less about being funny and more about being honest, and like having the opportunity to be honest, which is refreshing. And I don't know, it just felt right. And it's something that I want for literally everybody. Like, I just want honesty all the time. If we had good faith, if we had honesty, we would have so few problems with like the way that we engage in ideas. Excuse me. We could have real conversations about the Green New Deal and climate change, real conversations about the minimum wage, real conversations about Neera Tanden and her tweets, rather than this bad faith garbage that's like, well, Republicans have raised concerns about Neera Tanden's previous mean tweets. Like, they haven't raised shit. They're trolling you. They don't care. They're using this as an excuse. For 4 years, they pretended Donald Trump didn't have a Twitter feed. And now all of a sudden, they're like archaeologists going back through Neera Tanden's tweets. That's bad faith. And the response to bad faith should not just be to say, it's a little weird that they didn't feel this way about Donald Trump. It should be to cover what they're currently saying as bullshit, and not cover it at all if you know it's bullshit. So as a a journalist can't say that, and a journalist may not believe that, but I do. And if I were still in journalism, it wouldn't be a fit. It would be a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, well, I mean, the incentives seem to be very misaligned. I mean, of course, you have an ethical responsibility as a journalist to be unbiased, but you also have an ethical responsibility to be factual, right? And to...
For sure.
And maybe you should have a ethical responsibility to tell, report on stories that are for the benefit of society to know, not for the company that you work for to make more money, right? But I don't know.
News organizations are private companies. That's kind of
right.
That is part of the problem of the overall capitalist structure of the news industry, is that they are profit-making businesses. They have to make money, or else they wouldn't have.
So is medicine, though, right? Hospitals and doctors are private industry, but they have ethical and legal responsibilities not to do surgeries when they're not needed, and to not do harm under certain circumstances. And so you don't see surgeons doing, maybe you do, especially out here in Los Angeles, but you don't see surgeons doing unnecessary surgeries to make profit,
right?
And so
I totally get that. It's like applying that to the news industry is too idealistic, because it almost feels like the concern for being like the gatekeepers of what's true and what's not is too. I truly believe that journalists want to do that. I don't think anyone in journalism has like the bad intent to poison the well. I think they're just handcuffed by this horrible Republican Party that's weaponized their false neutrality, which isn't even their fault. It's like the industry has this norm that applied in 2010, 2012, 2014 even, that was like, you have to get one side, you have to get the other side, and we'll let the viewers decide. And then once Trump was just like, I'm going to lie about everything, and Republicans were like, okay, fine, we'll do that. It broke that model. So it's simultaneously complex and very simple, if that makes sense.
But people were lying, Colin Powell went to the United Nations and lied about, there being weapons of mass destruction in Iraq in 2000,
right.
But we just didn't have, social media to be just as on top of it.
Well, that's true.
Now.
And the concept, and then the reason about that is because it was in the news so much. And though there were things of that magnitude that definitely, and thankfully, linger. The weapons of mass destruction. We all know that was a lie that we went to war on. And Judith Miller, who was duped at the New York Times by sources who wanted her to print false claims of weapons of mass destruction, she got banished, and she's on Fox News now. At least last I checked, she was. Those were corrective steps. And I think the key difference between now and then is that when that happened, it was not a pattern of bad faith. It was enough to raise our flags and be like, hold on, like, let's be extra skeptical of everything. Let's double check, triple check these sources, like whatever happens at that level of like national security sources and approving them and all that stuff. Let's go back and be real sure what we're doing here. That is different than Trump being like, windmills cause cancer, and Kristen Gillibrand begged me for a job or begged me for donations on her knees, like all this disgusting shit that's not true every day. So when it starts happening on almost an hourly basis, and when the lies become the default, when the president says something and it's a lie, or at least your suspicion is it's a lie, your entire foundation of how you cover him should shift. And it should be, okay, can he prove he's telling the truth? And if not, we're not going to cover this. But that didn't happen. And so that is whereas with Bush, it was a pretty big lie about weapons of mass destruction that led to a lot of people dying. It's hard to argue that every day Bush was telling different lies as fast as he breathed. You could argue that the entire war in Iraq was just full of lies, and I obviously believe that. And I think a lot of coverage did reflect that when it was going on. But it's different because bad faith was not pervasive then, whereas now it is the operating standard of one party, and that just requires a different approach. And I can't even claim to know what that approach is. It's just like uncharted territory. It's weird to have a free press operating with a party that's fascist and giving the fascist party the same benefits that you give the party that's democratic. That doesn't make sense on its face, but it's like the only thing we know how to do, so we have to keep doing it. It's just very strange.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I do love the idea that you wrote about back in October or November, maybe it was, in the Washington Post op-ed that you wrote about just kind of a simple test.
Yeah.
You know, are you lying and blatantly, or can you answer this specific question that determines whether or not you are lying or not? And if you can't, then you're not coming on the show. You're
Just
not
say,
getting a chance to talk.
If you can't say Biden won, what are you doing here? And why are we having you on? I still have not heard a great response to that, other than, well, we have to put Republicans on TV. Yeah, I get that. But like, can we at least get a little bit deeper here? But
right.
No one, right. I clearly that message has not landed.
Yeah, but you keep saying it long enough, sometimes people listen,
If I do it in a super tweet and people pay me for it, then I'll be happy.
Right. Like, I really thought you were going to get, I think one of the first things you really started to push was something about Sean Spicer, and I was really rooting for you. I was like,
Oh my God.
So just, keep the faith, man. Just keep pushing.
Honestly,
because
thinking about Sean
the stuff
Spicer
that you're doing.
I appreciate that, but like the fact that you brought up Sean Spicer, I'm like, okay, that guy was on Dancing with the Stars. Like, what the fuck happened to that guy? Like, oh my God, it sends me into his tailspin.
Simpler times, dude. Simpler times. When that was all you had to worry about, I mean, shit.
I know.
I really appreciate having this conversation, though. I think that it's opened my mind up, and I think that like I said, I'm optimistic that we can make some changes, and I think conversations like this help us think through it a little bit more, and maybe that'll motivate some people to make some changes. And sometimes it's a very slow, arduous process, but I mean, what's the other option, right? I
hear you. I definitely hear you. And thanks for talking to me about all this weird stuff. And it feels good to talk to another person.
Yeah, well, that's the main thing is that it's just fun to talk to another human being these days. But we're going to start doing these in person too. So, when things are back to normal, if you're out in LA, we'll definitely do another one in person post-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
We'll do it right. I'm going to get a whole studio built out, and it'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on, and just appreciate taking the time, man.
Definitely. I'm here for you. I hope everything's good out in LA. But yeah, as soon as we're allowed to get on an airplane again, I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Negrin. Follow him on Twitter. You will not regret it.
Pay me $4.99 per tweet on Twitter.
Yeah, super follow coming soon. This is the Cam Meekins Show. We're out of here. Peace.